What's going on, everyone? So today we are doing a different type of video. As we like to do lots of different content, all arena based. We're looking at an article from Gibbs, who is this awesome dude. He does a lot of stats, data analysis on the ladder in arena, which is something I haven't seen in a really long time. I can't actually remember the last time I've seen something like this come out for WoW Arena. Really, really popular in like League and StarCraft, CS:GO, these type of competitive games. But in WoW in particular, not something that isn't too popular. So I've put a link to this full article below, and he's got some other stuff he's got there too, ladder decks, which is really cool. You can sort of see where you place in the ladder, and you know how well you're doing, all this kind of stuff. But I thought this type of analysis is really cool, super undercovered. Sort of relates to my own full-time work too. I do a lot of data analytics and sort of modeling too. So I thought it would be good to cover. So this was taken on the 26th of January. Obviously, the meta moves extremely quickly, but I guess this is the second month of Arena. So if we look at the rating distribution, it's still heavily pushed to that in threes, you know, that middle bracket sort of being, I guess, around this, I guess, median being 1400. And that kind of makes sense in my view. I imagine there's a lot of people who, you know, are doing threes or twos to get their combatant to a 7i level gear. I think Arena has definitely become so much more popular than it's ever been. And you can see that in streams, you can see that in trade chat with the amount of boosts being sold. You can see it on the Reddits as well. It's just absolutely popping off because they've actually put real rewards, gear rewards into Arena, which obviously attracts the majority of players. So, the interesting thing is, you know, 90th percentile is still 1780 in threes. So if you're sort of sitting at 1700 and you feel like, hey, I'm a 1700 noob, well, I mean, to be honest, you're still doing well compared to the majority of people. Um, and we can sort of see that in twos as well. And this is sort of something I've felt as well. I feel like twos is definitely something that is underinflated if you look at it. Like, there's just not as many people doing twos. Well, there probably is more people doing twos, but I feel like twos is sort of, you get your rating. There's at 1800 you have a huge spike, 1400 you have a huge spike, and probably, you know, during these 1600 phases as well, as people try and push, there seems to be a lot of distribution there. I imagine there's a lot of people here who are just doing their caps, right? They're not really pushing rating, but maybe they're going 5 or whatever, 20 for 20 or something to get their vault reward option, get some conquest points, stuff like that for their alts even. So nothing too crazy there, but you know, if you feel like you're not doing too well this season, maybe last season you hit 2400 really, you know, at the end of the season, imagine these will slowly inflate as we get sort of into March, when I expect the season kind of to end at the end of March or mid March. So looking at the performance of specs, obviously relative representation is sort of like how well they're doing compared to, I guess, their ladder representation. So I kind of want to look at leaderboard representation. Obviously, Arms Warriors are topping in twos. I think Arms Warrior HPAL is probably the strongest twos comp in the game. It's also a very popular comp, right? A popular class. Lots of people play Arms Warrior. A lot of pro PvE warriors touch Arms Warrior. Like if you're main Fury, you go Arms. There's not really a viable DPS spec apart from Arms in the warrior tree. So I think a lot of warriors are really attracted to it, and this kind of aligns with exactly what I've seen on the ladder. Versus a lot of mirrors, versus a lot of windwalkers, see a lot of rets and sub rogues playing rogue mage, and ferals playing like double DPS or, you know, feral druid HPAL, feral druid disc. All very, very good sort of specs there. And in the ladder, you know, you see a whole bunch of rogues too, which sort of mean that there's a whole bunch of rogues, but they're kind of underperforming a bit, which makes sense. There's just a lot of rogue players. A lot of them play a lot of 2v2 in especially double DPS comps. And I guess like there was a lot of people who started sort of jumping into rogues, BFA, not B, end of BFA, sort of start of season one, I think you just saw a lot of people interested in rogues because sub rogue was coming back firstly, right? Which hasn't been a viable spec in yonks, right? So the movement towards sub rogues, huge movement towards that early on. I think they were kind of one-shotting people in pre-patch as well, and then they were sort of one-shotting people for the first couple week or 2 weeks or something of Shadowlands. But now I think RM is still a really really good comp, but definitely not as interesting as like maybe you just get countered by certain like warrior H power comps that can play well, especially on the leaderboard when you're versing high rated people. In ranged, obviously you see a lot of Ellie's doing really well, right? But I kind of want to look at leaderboard representation. This aligns with exactly what I've seen. I've seen a lot of fire mages. Obviously, they can play rogue mage. They can play mage H power. They can play mage holy priest. They can play mage shadow priest, mage mage druid, mage Ellie. Like every mages almost work in every single twos comp. For double DPS, and they work in a whole bunch of healer comps too, which isn't usually the case. Usually, healer mage has always sort of been kind of not that good. But this season, because of the strength of combustion, in my opinion, you just see mages tear up the leaderboard, and ultimately, I guess due to the nature of combustion, because you can farm it back so quickly, a mistake in your defensive rotation between you and your healer against something like a mage H-Power is punished so hard. And usually the mage will get 3 to 4 combusts a game, even if you're putting massive pressure, just because a paladin does have the healing to keep them up, and the mage can sort of peel himself a bit with like sort of polying one target and fireballing the other between goes. Sort of just, I guess, keeping himself up until the next combust go, and then when they combust, they just run away and find their combust back, and vice versa. It's a really, really strong twos comp that I think, unless combustion, like the farming back of combustion or the damage of combustion, is considerably nerfed, I don't really see fire mage's position, at least in twos, changing very much. So, looking at healers, obviously, you see a considerable amount of Holy Priests, which is good. I feel like Holy Priest is actually quite a strong spec, especially in twos. Fair bit of Resto Druids, which is good considering a lot of people feel like they're very, very weak right now. I think they're quite decent in twos. They're fine in twos, to be honest. Resto Chamois, obviously popular spec in PvE as well, so you're probably going to see a considerable amount of people playing that, and they're quite good in twos as well. Disc Priest, known to be Disc and Holy, in my opinion, are sort of always known to be the kings of twos. And Holy Paladin obviously does not disappoint with a massive leaderboard representation, namely because they have a very strong toolkit, one against arms warriors, right? Like you have 2 bops, you have sack, you have freedom, you have bubble, a whole bunch of toolkit tools that really sort of counter warriors and windwalkers, or not counter, but allow you to live against them on multiple goes and extend out the game. And if that person doesn't have a Holy Paladin on the other team, usually you just out cooldown them and you just rotate a lot better and more efficiently. Disc Priest obviously makes sense. I feel like discs are quite strong in twos. They have fast games as well, so they're cranking. They're really cranking, but I think they're much more difficult and punishing compared to Holy Pally. And Resto Chamois, I don't think is any surprise. In threes, leaderboard representation, Warriors and Rets dominate. One, I think, is both of these guys have a comp they share together. Ret Warrior, which is the strongest melee comp in the game. Arguable. Maybe it isn't in tomorrow when reset happens. This is filmed on the 3rd of February, so maybe that changes. But I think you see a lot of enhancement shamans as well. Turbo, enhancement shaman Windwalker, enhancement shaman Hunter, enhancement shaman Ret. These sort of are comps that work. And considering that I imagine their representation was pretty much like 0 or something, 0.1 last patch, it's kind of cool to see this spec revived. You see barely any Fury Warriors. And obviously Retribution Paladins, same thing. Warriors, like these classes work with almost every single comp, for like warrior, paladin, monk. You can just kind of slot them in with any ranged. You can slot them in with a majority of DPS, melee DPS, sorry, and they're going to work. So of course you're going to see them represented a lot on the leaderboard. Sub rogue, they've got RPS and RMP. Largely, I imagine this is RMP though. It's sort of pushing that forward. So nothing too crazy there that isn't out of the blue. Maybe the arms warrior leaderboard representation is sort of interesting. How dominant it is. It is probably the most versatile melee in threes. You can kind of go into anything and destroy. So in terms of ranged, is anyone surprised at that? Sorry, let me go back down. Is anyone surprised at mage topping? I'm actually more surprised at how many shadow priests there are. I would have thought maybe, I guess shadow priests are a very popular comp, and they sort of fit with a lot of melee too. Elishams, Gibbs makes the point that it's a relatively unpopular spec despite their strength. This is something that I completely agree with. I think Elishamans are crazy strong right now. The issue is the majority of people have not played an Elishaman in their lives before, so like when they're re-rolling, they're still learning it. But I think on the leaderboard, you don't like. I can't really think of that many Elishaman mains. Like people have played Elishaman every season, and sort of are known for that. I think like Piff or something, Piff Zors or something. He like seems to play a lot of Ellie and multi classes a lot too, and he's really good. We're gonna forget people here. I can't remember their names now, but there's an Aflock Elisham team which performs quite well too. And then I think a lot of people who are learning Elishams. So I imagine as fire mages sort of, I guess, slow down in strength after nerfs and stuff like that, maybe you'll see a lot more Elishamans. Elishamans are quite good against mages as well. So that seems to be the natural meta response to the fire mage dominance. But we'll see soon. Balance druids obviously very very popular, right? But they don't really like. It seems like their leaderboard representation. So leaderboard representation, I imagine, is in like the top 100 or something, or top 150. I guess the top tier, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. That kind of makes sense because similar to Ellie, I don't know many balanced druid mains. I know a couple out there that do really well for themselves, but it's not just like a super overpopulated class. I don't think many people knew how to play balanced druid before it became really good. Obviously, you have people like Prev who've been playing balanced druid for a very long time and are very good at it. But then broadly, I don't think there's many balanced druid mains. Whereas a lot of people main Shadow Priest, a lot of people main Fire Mage, and interestingly, a lot of people also used to main Warlock, which has seemed to take a bit of a dip. My hypothesis is probably a lot of these Warlocks are Shadow Priests and balanced druids now. Healers, nothing too surprising here. Holy Paladins and Diz Priests sort of rampant. I think Holy Paladins just make sense. They can heal through, like they're one of the only healers that can actually heal for a lot of this burst. And Disc Priests similar. Like they have a couple comps, and while their cooldowns and mana are up, they can pump those heals and keep up with the damage coming out. But once they run out and they sort of flop over. But considering their comps that they usually played in, Ret Warrior, RMP, these games aren't lasting very long. They're kind of decided in the first sort of couple minutes, and with Ret Paladins, Disc Priests sort of have an extra healer in the game. That's no shade, but Ret Paladins heal a lot, so that kind of makes sense. Resto Chamois, I think this is probably a big surprise. I don't think Resto Chamois are as good as people expect them to be. This will probably change as the season goes on with Necrolord and scaling and all this kind of stuff. I still don't know if they're still going to be able to heal the damage that's coming out and be able to deal with the stops, but I think Resto Chamois are in a really good space, especially if casters become more popular. I think if you're a Resto Chamois and you're trying to heal like a warrior SP as like WPS, If you're trying to heal that against Warrior Disc Priest, you're going to have a really, really tough time. Um, Whereas a Holy Paladin has still a difficult time, but a lot more cooldowns and tools to deal with that. And Resto Druid, I think this makes sense as well. Like, kind of mages shit a lot on druids, with Klepto, combustion damage being so bursty. The ability to just remove all their hots and then do insane burst damage, so they have to get their hots back up, then use their big heals. Mean they're not going to be that popular. I feel like if fire mages drop off a bit and we see more Afflocks, we see more of the slower, roddier classes, you're going to see a lot more Resto Druids. I don't think Resto Druids have an issue of HPS, but the issue is sort of not many classes can ever heal that burst without massive cooldowns. And unfortunately, I think you'll see that with Mistweaver, Holy Priest as well. There's just not many buttons in the game that could heal Combust, and due to the fact that Combust comes up so often, that's always going to be an issue. So as the game slows down and maybe Combust becomes less of a massive like one shot, you'll probably see this change too. But hopefully this was useful. If you wanted to get more of a deeper, I guess, look at the ladder. If you wanted to check out all this, there's heaps of other stuff here, and there's really good analysis done by Gibbs here too. Check it out. It's really, really cool. If you like the stuff he does, give him a patron follow, give him a coffee, join his Discord, tweet him. It's really cool stuff, and we definitely need to support stuff like this in Arena because it just helps us understand the game a bit more. Helps back up some of the complaints about balancing as well in a way. And I feel like it largely follows what I think a lot of people suspected, but then to really see the drop off and difference between the top performing specs and the bottom performing specs, perhaps the game isn't as well balanced as it seems. But I will note that a lot of specs are pretty close, right? And these seem to be the specs that a lot of people tend to play anyway. Stuff like Beast Mastery, Demo Warlock, and Frost Mage haven't been too popular for a long time in Arena. And these other classes sort of align with the rest of what I thought. But really looking forward to doing this whenever these updates come out. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. Again, check his stuff out. And have a good one. I have more videos tomorrow. Take it easy, guys.